I didn't hear a click though
Oh,
when
you
you did the
didn't hear a
thing.
click? I think
No.
this mic is like, not to flex, but I think this
Uh,
mic is too good. Hold on, let's see.
it knocked it out. I didn't hear it at all. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Because it was loud. Wow.
That's impressive.
I'm gonna have to write that on their reviews on this blue. I think it's oh, what's the brand? It's the blue style, but it's a
That's all hardware that's doing that, or is that software that's knocking that out?
I don't know the difference. 100% of the proceeds from this monetized episode will go to Street Epistemology International. Anthony Magnabosco. I pronounced that correct, right?
You did.
Okay, perfect.
Congrats. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining me. I know I said this before, but I'll say it again. I really appreciate your time. It was very clear both before my research and after my research that you are a well-respected individual. People really enjoy your work and the way that you communicate with people and the way that you talk to people. And I was telling you before the episode, even the people on my YouTube channel that get on there every day just to like talk smack about my guests or what I'm talking about or my eyebrows or whatever, even they agreed that you were a great guest to listen to. They said they enjoyed your content. They said they enjoyed your style. So yeah, so I'm honored to have you on. I really appreciate you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. That's really cool. I wonder. Yeah. I don't know why. I mean, I just, you know, ask questions, listen. I try to be sincere and authentic when I'm doing it. When I first started doing it, there weren't a lot of people, talking to religious people in that way. When I look at the content that atheists are putting out today, that's a lot of what I see. I see a lot of people patiently, not everybody, you still have your
Right.
arguments. Don't get me wrong. It's more commonplace these days, but yeah,
Yeah.
that's really kind of them to say that.
I definitely think that, at least from since I've been paying attention to it, I feel like 2013 through maybe 2016 was very much the debates, arguments, fights, like get the views from those very inflammatory videos where the title is always so and so destroys so and so or something like that. And one of the things I really enjoyed about the videos that I saw of yours is that even if I figured that I knew what side of the argument you were on, you still didn't make it apparent in your delivery. For example, some of the most recent ones I watched is you were talking to a young woman about kind of gender fluidity and whether or not they're what she felt about non-binary individuals. And even though you, like, from your other videos, I've gotten a sense of kind of where you stand on those topics, just the way that you were communicating with her. And somebody even wrote in the comments, they said that she started with her like arms folded and then she ended with her posture much more relaxed in this street conversation. And I wonder if honestly that is why you see so many more videos like that, because yours have been so popular in that style that a lot of people, maybe you were their first introduction to that kind of language and communication and they just took that and ran.
Maybe. I mean, there are a lot of current atheist content creators that I'm friends with, for one thing. Like, I've become friends with, or they'll reach out to me. There was one guy, he's one of the current hosts on the Atheist Experience, who mentioned that, watching SE videos, and I guess some of mine, were helpful in him becoming more calm and being able to stay focused and entertain
Right.
other ideas that maybe you disagree with and being more neutral. So maybe, yeah, maybe. I mean, yeah, that could be the case. I don't know.
I think something that also helps a lot of people when they're trying to decide if they're going to deconstruct from Christianity is they watch channels like that where the topic isn't Christianity and religion is bad. The topic is, here's the ideas behind why that might not be the right thing for you. And when you allow people to make that decision for themselves instead of telling them what decision they should make, I feel like the results are much more successful and they're much more genuine. You don't have anyone caving to peer pressure. You have people listening to ideas and absorbing ideas and thinking about those things and then eventually making their decision.
That could be the thing. What I like most, though, about the SE approach is that you're still talking about those difficult subjects, and you are staying neutral generally and calm and civil, but you're still challenging
Yes.
that's the thing that I like about the
Yes.
approach so much is that even though it's calm and civil, you're really getting to the root of why people believe it. And it's
Yes.
especially when it comes to religious beliefs, it's not usually evidence. It's
Right.
usually, I was raised this way, or it gives me a good feeling to think that this is true.
Right.
And that's what's so cool. That's like the biggest payoff is when you have these talks and you start to unpeel those layers and get to the foundation of what's happening. So maybe it's the combination of, I think, like the thing that it draws me to it is that it is civil and it seems like it's effective in helping people
Right.
reflect and then shift in terms of their confidence that it's true.
Right.
And what else can you
Absolutely.
ask for? Like why else would you engage with somebody unless you wanted to do that? Like, talk with them, help them figure things out and reflect and maybe even update their confidence after they've thought about it.
Yeah.
And why debate and argue with them? It just doesn't seem quite as effective. There's a time and place for it.
Yeah.
The call-in shows maybe are more entertaining when you see somebody debating and arguing about those types of things. But yeah, if you want to have a good conversation with somebody, especially somebody that you know or you value the relationship, it seems like that's the way to go.
That's the important part, is if you value the relationship. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think also one of the things that at least helped me when I was deconstructing, what did it was not, here's facts, here's evidence, how about this? How about your God? Blah, blah, blah. I remember saying, like, I'm a Christian, and somebody saying, okay, why? And the debater in me knew that I should have reason and evidence and this and that. Like the debater in me knew, they're like, Sid, if you're gonna win this, you gotta have. But the only reasons I could come up with were always feelings, and I'd been told that.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like I'll be in trouble if I don't. I feel like I'll lose my family if I deconstruct. I feel like this is the right answer, but there was no denying that I had no facts whatsoever to back that up. And because that was so important to me at the time, that did more in my brain than anybody presenting me any kind of flyers of any kind or websites of any kind. And I think it does go back to that whole, people have to feel like it was their idea and their decision as opposed to being force fed.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't really work when you lead with, well, I suspect that you don't have any good evidence for this and you just believe it because it feels good. You really
Right.
should just give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they actually do have evidence for it. But it's interesting because that type of interaction, or at least that realization that maybe I don't have evidence for it, it seems like that discovery causes people to do a couple of different things. They can
Right.
either reflect and update, or they might be drawn to apologetics. They might, or pray
Double
or whatever,
down.
like they
Yeah.
double down, or they might say, okay, now I have to really bone up and figure out, like, what's the best way to defend this argument? And then they go out to find good apologetic arguments to maintain the belief. But they're approaching like that. And I don't know for sure if that's what's going on, but it seems like that's what's going on. It seems like most people who are drawn to the apologetics are doing so because they're looking for reasons to defend it.
Yes.
And when you start with that presupposition, then I think it biases everything that you encounter from that point on, because now you're looking,
Absolutely.
you're like, okay, yeah, that works.
Yeah.
And that sort of bias just comes in right from the very start.
Yeah. And do you think with the reaction that they have, do you think a lot of times maybe that has to do with the way they were asked? Like, if you're not asked the question in a defensive manner, you won't get defensive of it. If you're asked in a very kind, open manner, maybe you'll be more likely to consider it as opposed to just double down on it.
I don't know if maybe like whether somebody approaches you with a gentle approach like SE, or they just hit you with like an aggressive approach, how you respond to it is going to be different. There will probably be some people that will um reflect on it
Mhm.
and change, or they decide to go the other way. It's kind of hard to say. I don't think the approach really has any impact on what they do with it next. Like, I would
Right.
imagine if I have a conversation with somebody on the street, or even somebody I know, um they might just go either way, even though I used an SE type of approach. It's kind of hard to say. But I think
Yeah.
the most important thing is, here's maybe the biggest difference is that if you use an SE approach as opposed to an aggressive approach, although some may argue that SE is aggressive, you might open the door maybe for more future discussions with them if you kept it civil and respectful.
Yeah.
And that's really what you want when you're using something like SE, whether it's a religious claim or whatever. Ideally, you want to have the conversation proceed, and so that they can keep coming back for more interactions, and maybe they come back with better reasons, maybe to the point where I would actually want to adopt their view. Although
Yeah.
with a theistic claim, I think that might be kind of hard.
Yeah. Has there ever been a topic in which you totally changed your opinion based on what your guest said?
I have. It's never been the magical stuff or the religious
Right.
stuff. It's been more social or political,
Yeah.
those type of things. Like I've softened up my views on gun control.
Mhm.
I used to really be against this idea of seeing guns on people's hips here in
Yeah.
Texas. And I
Yeah.
just saw one the other day. It's like it still kind of rankles me, but I understand more some of the arguments for why they would want to do that.
Right.
So
Right.
I have found myself shifting, but on the religious stuff, not really.
Yeah.
I just don't find the arguments compelling.
Yeah. Well, that, and I feel like when when it's something that can be proven or disproven, it's a much easier to find a side to be on. But when one side has proof and the other side's arguments are entirely theoretical, theological, just it's the entire thing is based on faith. And at least they've been honest about that from the beginning, that their entire thing is about faith. It's difficult to change your opinion on something if you're a facts-based person, when the other side, their whole structure is built on the fact that facts don't matter and faith is all you need. And so,
Although I don't think they
whereas,
realize that, I don't think
right,
they realize it that bluntly, like the way that you specified it, just said it right now. I don't think they'd really give them that much thought. But that's
right,
usually how it comes down to. Yeah, I think it comes down to a difference in standards. And I think theists think that they have good standards for their evidence.
yes,
But when you get into it, you realize that like their standard for accepting the evidence that they've used to arrive at their conclusion, that standard is lower than the standard that they would require to lower their confidence in that conclusion.
yes,
They hold us to a higher standard to show that they're wrong
yes.
than they do to accept that they're right.
The burden of proof is on us every single time. And that shouldn't necessarily be the case. It should sometimes be on them. And something else I find interesting is academics I know who are devout Christians. They, in every other aspect of their life, they will have 21 cited sources MLA format to prove what they're talking about. But for some reason, when it comes to religion, they don't need that. And I've always been so curious about that. And not even in a sarcastic way. I'm genuinely, how does one do that?
I wonder that too. And that mindset of curiosity is so useful. If you have that going into the conversation, like if you're
Yes.
genuinely curious, like how do you manage that? Are you even aware that you're doing this? What do you
Yes.
think about this potential discrepancy in standards that I'm observing in you?
Right.
That kind of curiosity can be contagious, and it
Yeah.
can help them become more curious about their own views.
Right. And I think curiosity is an absolute blessing. And I didn't realize that until I became an adult, and I realized how many people in the world just aren't curious on a daily basis. They just don't really care about anything. But people just fascinate me, and their opinions on things just fascinate me, and their stories just fascinate me. And I didn't realize how happy I should feel that I'm a curious person. And I think encouraging that curiosity in other people, even if you don't like what you find, I think the curiosity is so important. But what did it for you? Because you grew up religious, right?
I did it for me. Was it curiosity? It was more like skepticism, or is incredulity the right word? Like just being bewildered that people were believing this stuff. Oh,
Yes.
that was part of it. And then the other part of it was, and I grew up in a Catholic environment, like a Catholic, Italian Catholic neighborhood south of Chicago, south side.
Oh, no
And
way.
yeah,
Really? I just moved from Chicago. That's cool.
you
So good.
did?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
so yeah, it was more like I just don't believe that people believe this. And I thought that they were just joking. I thought that most of them were pretending. I figured that they were just tricking the kids or something. I just didn't
Yeah.
understand it.
Like a Santa Claus type situation.
And then, yeah, exactly. And then when I realized that no, they believe this stuff, then it started messing with my mind. And I didn't really realize this until like maybe even the last 5 years or so, like how problematic those views were in my own upbringing and how it manifested itself in terms of anxiety when I was growing up as a kid.
Yes.
I really think that
Yes.
that was a very big part of it, you know?
Truly. Truly. Do you because you consider yourself an atheist, right?
I do.
Pretty clearly. Yeah. Do you ever find yourself, I've always wondered if this is just me, do you ever find yourself, because of that past trauma, just that little minutia in the back of your brain being like, but what if, like, what if,
Oh, what if it's true?
yeah, like, what if this whole
Oh,
time you've been denying God and he's going to ask you about that?
it could, yeah. I mean, I'm not, so maybe this gets to the definition of an atheist. Like, I'm still open to the possibility
Yeah.
that a God exists. I don't
Right.
know that a God exists or not. I just simply don't believe that there's one.
Right.
Or conversely, I actually prefer this definition. I believe that there are no gods. I
Yes.
actually actively hold the belief that there are no gods.
Right.
And we can get into why I think that if you want,
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
yeah, I mean, it crosses my mind, like there might be a close call in a car or something, a car accident, like, you sort of, your life passes before you start asking the big questions, like those thoughts still come back.
Yeah.
Or like this happens when I'm grilling food. I'll be grilling food and I feel the heat on my hand as I'm reaching over the flame, and it crosses my mind, you know, of this idea of hell. But I think those are just legacy beliefs that are there.
Right.
But they remind me of what I was raised with. And
Yes.
then they also remind me to sort of check in with my skepticism. You know, are there any good reasons for thinking that this is true? And consistently keeps coming back, well, no. So I actually have to like almost remind myself that there's nothing to be worried about
Yeah.
until there's something to be worried about.
There's really not. And then you'll cross that gate if you come to it, if on
If
Judgment Day,
it's,
I guess.
yeah, if it's true, then I think I could actually explain my reasoning. And of course, the God would understand
Yeah,
that
I've
I
said
was
the
being
same thing.
sincere in my pursuit.
Yeah, I've said the same thing. I'm like, listen, if God is real, then I would hope that he's a God who could kind of understand where I'm coming from. like, brother, you never
Yeah.
showed yourself. Like, I asked you a bunch of times to come down and show yourself, and you did, like, I told you that.
Yeah.
But so you grew up Catholic.
Yep.
How old were you when you figured out that that was kind of no longer the route that you were following? Like, do you remember when you first started kind of questioning how things were?
Oh, I was probably in third or fourth grade. It was pretty young. And it was actually the things that we were being taught and the divisive nature of what we were being taught. Like literally being told that women or, boys and girls were different, and not just in a physical way, but in terms of how God looks at you, and
Yeah,
the men are the providers and the women are subservient to the men. And just like, that doesn't seem right. Like that doesn't seem like a good message. It doesn't seem accurate. It seems problematic. And then going out on the playground that very same day and seeing the boys on one side and the girls on the other side, it literally divided us.
right.
And I think that there were just moments like that that underscored it for me.
Yeah,
But honestly, it was really more like, this just seems so implausible.
right.
It just seems like it's like made up. So I never really got into it. But then I didn't really think much about it until maybe when I was in my late 20s. Yeah, that's maybe when it sort of dawned on, maybe even 30s. Of course, 9/11 was a big deal.
I feel like
9/11
that was a big
was
moment
huge.
for a lot of former theologists
It was
and
huge. And
theists.
I wonder if the recent pandemic was sort of the equivalent of 9/11 for a lot of theists.
I wouldn't be surprised at all. And maybe it's one of those, it's kind of like a slow burn. Like maybe they're not quite saying it out loud yet, but give it like 2 more years and you'll have maybe a lot more people saying it out loud.
Maybe. But also social media. Like, I don't know. Are you on TikTok by any
I
chance?
am.
It's awesome. And ex-Mormon TikTok is amazing. Um, the atheists really have a voice on TikTok, and maybe it's just
They
the algorithm
do.
and I'm only being served certain messages, but I'll look at things that are showing how problematic religion is, and it will have 300,000 views.
Yeah. If you
Incredible.
look at like hashtag religious trauma, so many videos.
Yeah. So maybe this is I mean, it's heading in the right direction as far as I can tell. I think that's
Yes.
good. Good to see.
To your point, social media is, maybe there have always been a lot of us out there, but we didn't know there were others prior to social media. So I know that probably for the last 5 years that I identified as a Christian, I did it because I thought I was supposed to, because I thought every single person around me was doing it. And I thought I was just the odd one out. I thought I was just the weird one. I was the one, because, in Christianity, they teach you the devil will try to eat away at your love for God, and the devil will make you question yourself, and the devil will present arguments and stuff, and just don't fall for it. And I truly thought, like, oh, this is what they were warning me about. This is the devil wheedling into my brain, having some really good points if you don't have faith. And it took a lot longer. Whereas if TikTok and those things had been prevalent at the time, I think I would have discovered a lot sooner that there were tons of people out there that didn't believe in God and weren't devil worshippers, and they just were normal people who live in their happy lives.
I didn't have anything like that growing up. The only thing I had, and people of my generation, I'm Gen X, were just your own thoughts. And maybe you were lucky to be in a family that didn't believe this stuff, or maybe you stumbled across it. It would occasionally come up in college, but it wasn't even normally discussed. And maybe even today, people still don't. It's like one of those taboo subjects you don't talk about. But there's something about social media that makes it acceptable. You
Yeah.
can passively watch it, you can internalize it, and then you can start your own deconstruction. Is
Yeah.
usually what seems to be happening. So social media has been so great in that regard.
Yeah. And I think sometimes also somebody will share a video, and the video will be like pro atheism. And all you have to do is be like, oh, I guess they're an atheist. I didn't know that. Good to know.
Right.
Check
Yeah.
that little box in my brain.
Yeah. For the longest time, I would call myself an agnostic, not atheist, because there was, and maybe even arguably still is, a stigma associated with that word.
Yeah.
Much less so now than then.
Yeah.
So for the longest time, I just self-identified as an agnostic. I didn't even realize the definition of atheist. And if I had, it probably would have, I don't know what would have gone through my mind then. I probably still wouldn't have used the word. I mean, there was a point, maybe even like 10 years ago, where I was sort of like tiptoeing around that word, even in my own house.
Yeah.
And now we have no hesitation whatsoever about identifying as such. The stigma is much lower.
Is your immediate family atheist as well? Do they have different beliefs?
We don't talk about it that much. We have similar interests. We have similar reactions when we see things.
Yeah.
I guess, yeah, I would imagine they probably would all identify it along those lines.
And do you find that the way that you approach people through street epistemology has impacted how you parented and how you communicate with your kids? Or
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Is it like easier to talk to them and communicate with them about things?
It is. Well, it's funny because like in street epistemology, you don't usually talk about the claim, but you talk about the reasoning for how you arrived at your confidence in the truth of that claim.
Right.
So I think SE has probably been a big part of that. Even growing, when the kids were growing up, they're in college now, and they're home for the holidays. One's a junior and one's a freshman in college. So they're much older now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, many times we would just talk about things like, is that a good reason to think that that's true? Or how could that be shown to be false? A lot of the things that you hear, like the themes in SE videos are very common themes in the conversations that we have.
Yeah.
So we don't tend to argue about topics. What we talk about are reasoning for thinking about them.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that I've instilled in them, largely because of the SE stuff.
Absolutely. And I think that is a huge, important distinction too. The difference between arguing with somebody about what they believe versus understanding how and why they came to that conclusion and listening to what they have to say about it, and then giving your perspective on the matter. Huge difference there.
Yeah, which is not something you normally see in an SE video. Usually most of my examples, I usually hold off on sharing my views.
Right.
Because I didn't want to interject my views. It was really about their reasoning. But I think that's, in fact, we're developing a course for street epistemology, and that specific topic came up today. This idea of being honest with your conversation partner and even revealing your position if you disagree with them, even though it might cause them to become more defensive.
Yes.
It's probably the best thing to do. But there's dozens of examples on my channel where I didn't do that. And I think that in hindsight, if I could change anything, that would probably be one of the biggest things I'd change, is be more forthcoming as far as what my goals were and if they were interested. a lot of them, a lot of the people I interviewed didn't really care. They just wanted to give me 5 minutes. They would
Yeah.
answer all my questions, and they didn't really care about
Yeah.
my position.
Yeah.
But there's this one SE content creator. His name is Mark Solomon. He's got a channel called Being Reasonable. And one of his indications of a good SE talk is if his conversation partner asks him questions about his views in return. And I think that that's such
Mm.
a great marker
Yeah.
that shows usually that they're engaged
Yeah.
and they're not afraid of asking you questions. And they might even be more open to what it is you're saying if you've handled yourself well prior to them asking you these questions.
Interesting.
Mhm.
And I feel like another way that seems to work with people who you're not sure if they want to hear like a negating point, but you really want to ask them a question is I'll say something to the effect of, now, what would you say if someone were to say this? And then I present like the argument, I've heard this. What would you say to someone who said that to you instead of being like, well, I'm going to ask you, because I feel like giving them that theoretical option, this person in this either that doesn't exist who, so, metaphorically said this thing, what would you say to them?
I think that that's a great suggestion. It takes it's not coming from you.
Right.
It's coming from some hypothetical person. And that is probably the adjustment that I would make as far as a street interview, like you might see on YouTube of people doing street epistemology, as opposed to doing it with a family member or a friend. That kind of positioning is really useful.
Yeah.
Another approach, there's another person, his name's Kevin, and he's got a channel called Rational Rumination. It's funny
Nice.
how these there's
I
cordial
love the
curiosity,
titles.
deep discussion, rational rumination. There's always interesting diamond
Yeah.
discourse.
Yeah.
Um, I'm forgetting so many of them. But what's his approach? What he does is he'll do that too. Like, what if somebody came by who has this different belief and now you're thinking of this other person? But he also explains what he's doing, which is something that I started doing later in my SE videos.
Mhm.
It's been this whole progression, but what he spends a lot of time explaining what he'd like to do next and get their buy-in. Like, okay, so we've established what your claim is, and now I'm wondering how sure you are that this is true. And here's why I'm doing this, because when I view beliefs, they're not binary, either true or false, but
Right.
we think that they're true to strengths, like on a gradient.
Yeah.
And if it's cool with you, I'd like to ask you your sense of confidence from 0 to 100.
Oh,
And so
that's
he's,
good.
as opposed to saying, all right, now let's see if we can scale your confidence from 0 to 100. He's
Yeah.
easing them into it. He's explaining what he's doing. He's clarifying any confusion about what he's doing, and he's making it more of a partnership. And I think we need to see more of those examples.
Yeah,
And I think
absolutely.
I think that's the way to go with family members and friends too.
Yeah.
We're in this weird moment where we have lots of examples of people doing street epistemology with strangers, but very few examples of them doing it with family and friends. And you have to make adjustments.
Yes.
So maybe
Yes.
what we need to see is more videos of people making those adjustments so that people can start using this more with their love.
Another thing this I've found helps with people who are very aggressively for their point. Sometimes you'll ask somebody a question and you can tell they've just been waiting for somebody to ask that question and they just go off about their opinion. Is if I really want to know something and I'm really nosy, but I don't want it to sound like it's my opinion, I'll say, now, thank you for your point. Now, I'm sure you've heard people say, and then I'll say what I think without putting it on me. Like, now I'm sure, even especially if nobody has ever said it, I've never heard anyone else say it. I just claim that. Now, I'm sure, with your opinion and stuff, like you've probably heard people say, all over the internet, this thing. And then they answer it legitimately, but they've never seen it anywhere because you've never seen it anywhere. It's just your thought in that moment. And you're just really nosy and want to know their answer to the question.
Yeah, sometimes you have to make adjustments like that depending on the
Yeah,
situation. If they're really dug in, they're really defensive, then maybe it's funny how a little slight adjustment of a question can completely change the whole dynamic of that
absolutely.
question and how it's interpreted.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When you started your journey to street epistemology, because I know that is so much of your online presence, was that started by having religious questions for people, or was that started because you wanted to know everything? Because I know you cover social topics and all sorts of things, but I wasn't sure which came
Yeah.
first, the chicken or the egg.
The first thing that came for myself going out there and talking with people was religion. I wanted to talk to people specifically about God. In fact, I even had a sign made up. I experimented with different versions of it, but it was like, why do you believe in God? Let's talk 5 minutes. Like that was specifically why I went out to talk to people.
Yeah.
Because the book that introduced the concept was called A Manual for Creating Atheists. And it was positioned as, here's this approach that you can use with theists. And that's exactly what I went out to do. So it was just in my mind. I don't know if it even crossed my mind that I could use it for other claims. But I quickly realized that you could use it for other claims.
Was it just that curiosity?
It was more out of necessity, because I was running into people that they said, well, I don't believe in any gods. And I've already stopped them. And they might say, well, can I give you some other topic that we can talk about? And I'm like, I don't know if it works that way, but I guess, and then
Yeah.
before you know it, we're talking about karma and God, or karma and ghosts, magical stuff, spiritual
Yeah.
stuff, the law of attraction. And then slowly I was easing my way into other topics, like you mentioned, transgender issues or social
Mhm.
issues and politics, gun control. That was just a natural progression of thing. In hindsight, I wish the book was written for everything rather than that one thing.
Have you ever thought about writing that version of the book?
Well, the same author, Peter Boghossian, wrote a second book called How to Have Impossible Conversations, where he expanded it out. I don't even think he mentions God or religion or anything in that book. You can search. I mean, somebody can search. I don't think there's any mention of it whatsoever. So that book's been written, but I have been thinking about writing my own book of my journey and some of the behind the scenes things that have happened. I mean, it's been an incredible journey, and there have been specific conversations along the way that were milestone markers. Like, ooh, this one was different. Something unique happened here. What was going on?
Yeah.
And it resulted in discussions in the SE communities, and we've adjusted the approach. Not just from my talks, people who are having these conversations would get together and talk about these things. Like, I use the outsider test for faith to compare how they're reasoning about things to somebody else who arrived at a different conclusion. But they said that they don't care if it's true or not. What do I do now? And it led to this development of all these little tools that we use.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's really, so it's definitely been like a trial and error situation.
It kind of, yeah.
Except less error and more learning opportunity.
Well, both. Like the learning opportunity came from the errors, but I don't even know if I call them errors.
Right. I feel like error is the wrong word.
Yeah, like stumbling blocks or like obstacles would be a good way of describing it. Yeah,
that could be the title of your book: Trials and Obstacles.
There you go. Street Epistemology. Yeah, it was like, I hit this obstacle, I don't know what to do. Let's crowdsource this. Let's figure it out. And that's what's made SE so robust and effective, is that we've crowdsourced this for nearly a decade from people around the world on a variety of different topics.
That's so cool.
It's really been hardened and really useful.
And then we kind of see people take it and run with it on their own channels, doing their own videos. That's really cool.
We're seeing variations of it too. So like there's this one guy, David from Sound Epistemology. Mm-hmm. He's been experimenting with hidden claim street epistemology. So he says, if he'll find somebody, again, it's with a stranger, it's not with a loved one, although he's done it. Has he done it with people he knows? You can absolutely, in fact, I'd recommend using hidden claim SE with somebody that you know. This is where you say, like, let's take one of your beliefs that you think is true, and I want to explore your reasoning for it, but don't tell me what the claim is. Keep it to yourself. And then they'll ask for the level of confidence. They'll say, surface your reasons. Now, sometimes in the surfacing of reasons, you can sort of guess what the claim is. But still, it helps you stay more neutral. And I think it helps them feel more safe, because now you don't know what the claim is. So you may actually believe the claim to the same degree of confidence, or maybe even higher than what they do.
Interesting.
There's one guy, I have to mention another channel, Abstract Activist. His name's Nathan. He has been doing, he's been doing some great work. He worked on the SE survey, which is awesome. It's on the SE website, which maybe we can talk about. But he did hidden claim SE with a whole bunch of people in a hot tub. What? So he had 6 or 7 people, I think, if I remember the story right. it was a quiet night. I think they had been drinking, and he talked to them about SE and said, "I'd like to show this to you right now." And he asked them all to pick a claim, and he asked the same types of questions, and he basically SE 6 or 7 people simultaneously. And there were moments of deep reflection,
Wow.
and a lot of people pulled him aside and said that was one of the best experiences I've ever had. It was awesome.
Wow. That's interesting. But I'm guessing he didn't have it on video or anything. It was just,
No, that's one of the, yeah, that's one of the regrets of a lot of people who do SE, is that oftentimes their best conversations are not recorded.
yeah. But at the
And
same time, if they
that's
were
the trade-off.
recorded, the person might not have been as comfortable saying what they said that made it so
Yeah,
powerful.
right, exactly. And
Wow.
that's the dilemma that we face in SE, is how do we show conversations with loved ones where you are recording them, and ideally you want them to be consenting to the recording.
Of
Although I
course,
suppose
yeah.
you could record it and then afterwards you can say, "Hey, by the way, I was recording that," just to keep it authentic. Do you
Yeah.
mind? That might be the only workaround, but you don't want to be sneaky about it. But
Right.
yeah, I think the recording, the recorded nature of it can skew it
Right.
quite a bit.
Yeah, I feel like there are some people who, if you tell them they were on camera, they'll get a little more performative and a little more kind of bombastic about it. And other people, if you tell them they're on camera, they'll either just straight up shut it down, or they'll not tell you what they would have told you if they hadn't been on camera. They're just not comfortable.
I'll never forget this. I was interviewing this Muslim student at the university about 5 years ago, 6 years ago. And I asked, "How confident are you that Allah is real?" And he gave a very high percentage. It wasn't 100%, but it was like 90s or something. And then I had my 5-minute timer go off. We probably talked for a few more minutes after that. And then I turned my camera off, and then he walked up to me and he said, "Just so you know, I'm way lower on the confidence, but since you were recording me and my parents can see this." And so he admitted that he was not being uh,
Interesting.
sincere with his answer.
Interesting. And that makes you wonder how many people did the same thing but didn't say anything about it afterward.
It does make you wonder, yeah, like, and it makes me wonder how representative the video examples that I've been uploading to YouTube are, if there's that potential, for that.
Maybe a few years ago, that might have been a common occurrence or more common. But I think now, kind of to what we were saying about social media and TikTok and things like that, making these conversations more normal and more respectable. And our generation, the younger generations, really just like stepping up and saying, like, mental health discussions are normal, being an atheist is normal. I think honestly, you're probably getting, especially if you're interviewing Gen Z, you're probably getting more honesty from them, and they don't even have to know they're on camera. They're just like, we'll tell you. They seem like a very blunt, honest generation.
Yeah, now I haven't interviewed in a number of years. Well, since like 2000. So yeah, maybe there's something to that. Maybe that was the sense that I got when I moved from the Alamo with the older people and the tourists that were there, and the yelling street preachers. And then I moved to the park where there were largely 30 to 80-year-olds there. And then when I went to the campuses, it seemed like the younger students were more comfortable being recorded,
Yeah.
and they were being more forthcoming. Although that
Right.
example that I gave you, it was a young student. So yeah, it's probably comes down to the individual. But I think you're right. I think there's less stigma. People are used to seeing people being recorded. Yeah, I think maybe younger people are a little bit more open.
I've also found, this is just opinion, but I think it is true based on my interactions with people. The older the generation, the more there is this invisible thing, this invisible pressure, making them want to remain, what's the word I'm looking for? They have a sense of tact that they want to keep, that nobody's asking for, but for some reason it was drilled into their minds and into them as their generation was raised, that it's like, you want to look this way, you want to sound this way, you want to believe this, you want to everybody's doing it, but now everybody's not really doing it. And their generation still has that invisible pressure to, no, you are a Christian, you are a believer, you do, like, what you say is what you live by. Where I feel like the younger the generations get, the more they're like, I'm allowed to change my mind, it's perfectly okay.
Yeah, maybe there's something to that. I mean, there's certainly a lot more atheists running around these days, and they're out about it. So again, there's less of that stigma, where maybe
Yeah.
it's more conducive for people to sort of think that way, possibly.
Or do you think, another thought that I have is I talked to a pastor once, and we were talking about atheism versus Christianity. And I asked him, why is it so important to you that you stay? Because he admitted that a lot of the questions I was asking were very good questions. And a lot of questions that atheists have in general are very valid questions. And so I asked him, why is it so important to you that you remain the way you are as opposed to exploring this other side of you that could potentially exist? And he said, because my entire life would have been for nothing. I would have wasted my life and it would have meant nothing. And I wonder if the closer people feel they are getting to death, the harder they're clinging to opinions and ideas that they spent their entire life defending, because they're starting to realize, if I admit that I'm wrong, or if I admit that it could potentially be different, I, in their opinion, lived for nothing. I don't think that's the truth, but in their opinion, they lived for nothing. They stood for nothing. They acted on nothing. They defended nothing. And it was all for nothing.
It's a bitter pill. I don't know, because, I've talked to a lot of older people who are open-minded, not as comfortable being on camera,
Right.
to be clear. So maybe they're a little bit more cautious in that regard. But as far as their open-mindedness about their views, even though it might be painful to recognize that they did waste decades of their life, it seems like the older people were maybe just as open-minded as some of the younger people.
That's good. I hope so.
That was encouraging
Yeah.
to discover. It's not a scientific study. I mean, I could be
Right.
off on that, but that was my sense. And maybe it was because of the places I was going to.
I was about to ask that. Do you think it's a demographic area wise?
Yeah, because I was going to a quiet trail where people had time to carve out, they made time out of their schedule to go to this thing to get some exercise. They were doing something to benefit themselves, likely physically and mentally. And maybe they were primed for that sort of reflective mindset, or they're already open-minded, as opposed to somebody who's just, it's all about work and coming home and then working around the house or doing family stuff. And they don't have much more, a lot of bandwidth to be thinking about these things.
And I think a lot of people are scared to think about those things. I think some people, it's just a fear. I think you, just like anything else, just like you meet people who are afraid of spiders or ghosts or whatever, I think some people, when you say, what if God's not real? They're like, what if? We'll see. And then other people, if you're like, what if God's not real? It's terrifying.
Yeah, I distinctly remember a few times where I'd be at the Alamo and I'd simply be introducing what I was doing. And this is when I'm here to talk about your God belief and why you think that it's true. And some people would just be, whatever, what would they do? Like, they take their cross and like, get behind me, Satan. They would literally say that, and then they'd back away.
Yeah.
Slowly, like they were terrified, just because they encountered somebody who didn't believe or was asking questions about their belief. They just immediately shut down. But that was rare. And I mean, that was almost 10 years ago. So I'm hopeful that maybe the society has changed a little bit more.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're out there. There are people that they just don't entertain those questions.
Yeah. Do you find that you get different responses when you're in the South versus when you're in the North? Or like your ideas are more welcomed in either area more so? Or is it pretty much the same?
I haven't done enough conversations in the North to really say. Okay, so if I have done some in California, if that's what you mean by North.
Sure.
I'll go with that. So, no, I really haven't noticed much of a difference, whether in the South or the North. The type of claims that are being surfaced are more standardized. Like in the South here in Texas, I'll offer a bevy of different beliefs that they can pick, and they almost always pick the God one, which is cool because that's one of my favorite topics to talk about, and it impacts so many other beliefs. So I love going for that one if they bring it up. In the West, it's so like in California, it's usually about the law of attraction. If I put it out there, if I put good things out, good things will come back.
Yeah.
Be way more of that. And then I know, like in Portland, I've got a friend up there, Nathan. He says that it's horoscopes. It's one of the first, and when he goes to the party, it's one of the first things that somebody will ask him is what his sign is.
I can see that in Oregon.
There's some regionality to it.
Yeah.
But as far as like the open-mindedness of the person or their willingness to engage, it's usually pretty much the same.
Do you have a belief of any kind that people are surprised by, or that's considered like more out there?
Oh, good question. I don't really share my beliefs too much with m- my friends, I guess, or at least my online friends. Do I have beliefs that are out there? Um, I guess the circles that I travel in, most of the beliefs I have are pretty standard fare. There's really nothing too shocking that stands out
Dang.
that I can think of. I know.
Nothing I
I
can
wish.
make a big bombastic cover for this video on.
Yeah. What would I say? I don't know. I mean, I think polyamory is okay. I think I'm pro like what's it where you can make your own decision about your own death.
Something euthanization, like
Yeah. Euthanasia. Oh,
yeah,
no, not is euthanasia?
euthanasia, but
Is that
there's like
it?
a term
Yeah.
for it. It's like humane euthanasia or something like that.
Yeah, I'm totally down for that. Um,
100%.
okay, I don't think the whole antinatalism thing just doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. I
Yeah.
have a bias towards humanity,
Yeah.
and I think like things keep improving in the way that they are. Like very likely, well, not. I mean, it's possible, I guess, that humanity can actually be better for a longer period of time than it has. So I think the good has the potential to outweigh the bad in the
Yeah.
grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
But no, I don't really have too many shocking beliefs or things that stand out. I'm pretty boring. I really am. Yeah.
Yeah, I follow the anti-natalist like Reddit page, and I'm always just really surprised. I don't know. I'm always just like, the way I see it is, if you aren't going to be responsible with a kid or you can't afford a kid, don't have a kid. And then if you are responsible and you can afford a child, feel free to have a child. I just don't understand why it has to be an umbrella of, you either believe that humans should stop being born or you believe you should have 25 kids, no in between. And that's just very bizarre to me, but it's very fascinating to read. I follow a lot of subreddits where if people saw that I followed them, they would think I had those opinions, but I just like to read what the other side is saying.
Yeah. Yeah. And I didn't even know that antinatalism was a thing until I ran into somebody who I had 2 or 3 conversations with them about a variety of different topics. One of them is, does water have 2 hydrogen molecules and an oxygen molecule? We essayed that, which was not a fun talk for me. But then they came back for like their 4th talk, and then she brought up antinatalism, and that was a really that's on my channel. It's one of my favorite talks, and like I wonder if she would have felt comfortable bringing up that subject if we hadn't had those 2 or 3 talks before that. I think maybe she needed a little time to sort of get comfortable with me to
Like establish
surface the
that
topic.
trust.
I think maybe that was the case. Yeah,
And she was pro antinatalism.
she was. Yeah, but in hindsight, like that kind of shifted into me becoming concerned about her well-being, and was she suicidal? I wasn't, and I got a lot of grief in the comments about that because I guess that's a typical direction that these antinatalist conversations go, and it's usually an indication that you're kind of talking past each other, or maybe you didn't fully grasp what it was that they were saying. I probably handle an antinatalist talk a little bit different than I did there.
Yeah, but I can also see why you might come to that conclusion, because in following those posts, even though for anybody watching, this is not all of them, some of them will be like, why does this woman have 5 kids? I don't even want to be alive right now. Like, and so it's like, it's safe to assume, that they're struggling, that they have, yeah. But again, not everyone, don't come for
Yeah.
me.
They may be
Yeah.
perfectly fine and stable and not have those thoughts at all.
Yeah.
But they really have thought it through, and they think that that's the best option for all of humanity. And they have a reasoned argument for it.
Absolutely. And I think there's also something really interesting, powerful, depending on what the topic is, in watching someone tell you about something they're very passionate about and they believe very heavily, whether you agree or not. I just think I teach storytelling classes, and watching people tell their story uninterrupted for 10 minutes, you can tell it's the first time ever in their entire life they've gotten to talk about it totally uninterrupted. fascinating. And I get that same feeling when I watch people defend a subject that they know a lot of people think is indefensible, and getting to do it totally uninterrupted, just getting to go, getting to express their point of view, knowing they're not going to get totally attacked afterward, but agreeing to answer questions maybe. And I just think there's so much that we can learn from people in that. And that while the heated arguments, they make for entertaining YouTube videos, although I feel like I'm getting way too old for that. I just see the covers and I'm tired. I feel like if you are actually out to learn, one of the fastest ways you can learn about other people, about topics, and about yourself is by doing what you do and asking people a question and letting them explain to you why it is they feel that way. Because a lot of times it's not going to be why you think. It's not.
Yeah, and a lot of times the reasons that they might lead with, they themselves discover, well, maybe that's not such a good reason to think that that's true. You could actually, very often, if you just let people talk and you help them feel comfortable, sort of reveal this stuff, they come to these own conclusions. They actually, they're improving in how they're reasoning about things in the middle of the conversation, and you can see that playing out in how they're telling their story to you. It's really neat to see.
Absolutely. And I tell people all the time, I used to have a lot of very polarizing opinions. And I used to think I was 100% right. Like even on the debate team where we're taught to like research and prove everything, I used to think this is it. This is the way. I think I was an asshole. People who knew me back then say that I wasn't, but I feel like I was. But I thought that I knew everything there was to know about everything. And all it took was very patient people asking me why about everything that was my whole brand, my whole personality. Great. Why is that? And then I go off saying exactly everything they know I'm going to say. And then they say very similarly, well, what would you say to this? And maybe there's not an answer, or maybe I have to look it up. And it turns out I actually kind of agree with that question. That's a good question, as opposed to just locking it down and being like, no, 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 double down. I'm right. Blah.
Sounds like you were growing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I very much got that experience when I was watching some of your videos. Is I felt like I was the other person, and the kind, patient people were the ones with the clipboard and the timer just saying like, okay, why? Like, why do you think that? How is it that you came to that conclusion? And you go through your own crisis realizing that you have no idea why you think those things, or the answer is always, well, my mom said, or so and so said, my pastor said, somebody said, so I just went with it. It's like, I've never looked it up, I've never done research, I've never and then you spend time long after the conversation is over mulling it over, thinking about it, looking it up, and it turns out you're a totally different person than you thought you were. But you never would have discovered that about yourself if somebody hadn't had the patience to be like, why? But I feel
Yeah.
like it goes the other way too. I've been that person saying, okay, why? And I've learned so much, and I've changed my opinion about stuff because I've been
Mhm.
like, that's a really good point. I didn't think about that. I thought I was going to come here and tell them my perspective when really their perspective is a really good one.
Yeah, but that approach of questioning instead of telling is so counterintuitive for us. I think
Right.
that we live in a culture where you're sort of expected to state your position and your reasoning why and make the case.
Yes.
And that approach, which is what we do in SE, take yourself out of it, ask questions of them, listen to what they're saying, actually, consider what they're saying because they might be right. But really form, because if you pay really close attention, you can form really good questions, and those questions help people reflect. And we don't live in a culture where that happens, especially on social media. Um, and I don't know what to do other than what we're doing in order to shift that culture. It I think the best we can do is show examples of this type of reflective inquiry happening,
Mhm.
with the hopes that maybe people see the value of it and how it
Yes.
changes. It has the potential to change who you're talking to, who's made that
Yes.
claim, and it has the potential to change you for the better.
Yeah.
And that's about the best that we can do. And I don't know how to speed that up. We have some ideas. I mean, we formed a nonprofit and we're doing all these cool things. I mean, I can't believe some of the things that we're working on. And I think that's my goal. I want to get these tools into people's hands and help them feel comfortable enough to use them. That's the
Yeah.
biggest hurdle. It's the biggest hurdle isn't teaching people how to do this. It's getting people to do it.
Right.
And
Right.
I don't know how to speed that up other than what we're doing. And social media is a big part of that.
Well, something that I thought was really effective, and I don't know how often you do this, but it might be something you implement more if you don't do it a lot. I didn't see it more than once. On your video where you were giving your speech to the American Atheist Convention, you showed a video of you doing it wrong.
Yeah.
And I think showing people that version is almost as impactful as show, because you can say all day, here's the right way to do it, here's the great way to do
Right.
it, and people think they're doing it right, but then you show where you started, because I know a lot of people really look up to you and they follow you and they want to like learn from you. If you show where you started and you're like, this is what it sounds like, I'm not proud of this version, but here it is, I think people will attach to that. And one, it gives them the ability to laugh with you like they did at the convention. And then
Mm.
two, it gives that whole, everybody starts somewhere, the intent was good, the beginning, the seedling was there, we just had to take time, the same time that you take to talk to people and hear their point of view, you take that amount of time and care on your skill developing, and it just blows up from there.
That's a good point. And I've struggled with that. So most of the videos that I've uploaded to my own channel are what I view as really good examples of SE where everything went right.
Yes.
And you're right. It's there's some challenges with that. Like it could set people up for failure. It could discourage people. You didn't say this specifically, but
No.
it could discourage people if they try to do an SE talk and it doesn't go as smoothly as that one video that I saw, right?
Right.
So one thing that I try, by the way, there's no such thing as a really there's no such thing as a perfect SE conversation in my
Right.
view. So even the ones that I upload, I still usually at the end of the talk, I did this more recently, maybe in the last 2 or 3 years of me doing it, where they'd be walking away and I'd immediately switch into doing like a breakdown. Okay, so this part went really good and this is where it didn't go so good. But it's funny that you mentioned like uploading or showing the bad examples, because I have hundreds of conversations on my hard drives. And I've been thinking about going through and just pulling a typical day, maybe even a day where there weren't any conversations that I even uploaded to YouTube during that day, and just playing bits of them and then pausing the video and then explaining what was wrong with it.
Yeah,
I think that would be useful. So
I think so too.
yeah, I actually started editing one video. I call it like what
The
did I call
worst
it?
of.
It's something like examples from the vault, or vault, something about the vault. But I started editing it, but then I started realizing how much time it takes to edit a video. Do you ever, it takes so much time
It's a
and I
long
don't have the
time.
time.
Right.
But maybe I'll release a couple of those. I think it would be cool.
Absolutely. Especially now that YouTube offers those like short reels. Maybe it can just be a little,
Oh, maybe. Yeah.
the daily bad, the daily worst, the
I
daily
show the
tip.
bad and then point out what was bad, and
Yeah.
then that's the learning moment.
You could even call it like learning moments or something like that. I feel like
Mhm.
you would do a better job. I feel like you would come up with a more creative. But
I'll try. I mean, I kind of struggle with that. Like, what is a good example? And you do a disservice to people if you're only uploading the best examples. That's why I thought it was
right.
important to point out what was wrong about it, even though they were good examples.
Yeah.
In most cases, there were still some bad examples that I think I uploaded.
Yeah. Absolutely.
There's one called Rocket Ship to Mars. Check that out. It's a complete train wreck. The guy, what did he say? Like, he was saying, weed will never be legalized in the United States. It's impossible, like getting a rocket ship to Mars. You just can't do it. And every couple months, it seems like we're shifting more and more towards legalizing weed across the country. And it just so happened I was driving by the park, and I'm gonna just drive in here, and I saw him there. This was like 3 weeks ago. And I thought, if they legalize weed nationwide, I'm going to do a follow-up interview with him. But yeah, the whole, I kind of got off the track there.
Just walk up to him smoking a blunt, being like, hey
I was
man,
like,
so
hey,
about that.
you want an edible? And I'd like to talk to you about this impossibility, because he was so insistent and he was so close-minded. But I thought it was important to show how dogmatically closed he was. and how I still tried to stay calm even despite he was really aggressive in my face and everything. But I'd love to do a follow-up with him.
Do you think he would do it?
I think all I would need to do is stand out there, and I think he would walk up to me. He
He
was
would
he was that type of person. He was the kind of person that I think he sort of thought that he owned the park,
Yeah.
and he would be flagging people down and start talking to women about why they have tattoos on, and then
Gosh.
people would be walking up with a dog, and he'd point out the rules to them that you can't bring your dog on the trail. He's one of those types of people. So I bet if he saw me out there, he'd walk up to me. I wouldn't even need to ask him. He would just start.
He would not be able to resist.
I don't
Just go there with a dog. Just go there with a dog, and you'll guarantee that he comes up
a
to you.
dog and a blunt. I'll go
Yeah,
with a
there you
dog and a
go.
blunt.
Well, Anthony, I know that I told you I would only take an hour of your time, and we're coming to the bottom of that hour. But if you had any advice for somebody looking to grow in their communication style, in their opinion, in the way that they approach individuals who have polarizing beliefs or beliefs that make them so upset, because it is very easy, especially as we go into the holiday season and we hang out with family. I think there's a reason you never see videos of people having these conversations with families. What would you say to them? What advice would you leave them with?
Remind yourself that beliefs are transient. They're just passing through. So the beliefs that your uncle has, we always pick on the uncle, right, at the holidays, but your aunt, your uncle, your mom,
Yeah.
whatever, your family
Yeah.
member, maybe just remind yourself that it's conceivable that they didn't put a lot of thought into why they have that belief, and they probably haven't given it serious consideration, and try to see them as separate from the beliefs that they hold. That's really helpful. You can remind yourself that you've been mistaken. Probably one of the biggest things you could do to develop those sort of skills is just watch examples of people staying calm in the face of those crazy things that people say.
Yeah.
Like it really helps to just watch it and maybe pretend that you're having that same conversation, and that you're staying calm. I think that's probably one of the best things you can do is just train yourself and practice. And you can even just practice on your own. You can watch an example of a bad conversation and just note, okay, like that seemed to get really hostile when the person said this, and then, or the person asked a genuine question, but they deferred. They didn't actually answer the question that was asked.
Yeah.
Observe. Just be mindful of what's happening, and also try to be mindful of the emotions that are going through you, and maybe even verbalize them. That could really be useful too. I'm really feeling agitated now, and I don't want to, because I really want to understand why you think that this is true.
Right.
And that could be helpful. Nonviolent communication is also very, very helpful.
Absolutely. And very important, I feel like.
Yeah. Have your audience look into that, or your viewers, if you're having trouble staying calm, or you're not making any progress with the claims that you're making, you're probably talking past each other as far as what your needs are.
Man, that's good. I like that line you said. You said nonviolent communication is important. Love that. And is there like a website or an organization for that?
There is. It's called the Nonviolent Communication Movement or something like that. If you just Google it, you'll find it.
Okay. And my last question for you is, do you mind if I take any proceeds made from this episode and donate it to Street Epistemology International? Would that be
I
okay?
wouldn't mind at all. You can do whatever you want to. That's kind of you to ask. Yeah.
I didn't want to like put that up top at the front of the episode and not tell you about it first. I feel like I should ask.
No, that'd be really nice. Yeah, we're always looking for donations. We just met with our donors this 2 weekends ago, I think it was. We had 4 meetings to meet with all of our donors that have supported us over the years, and we'll probably make it an annual thing. And it was cool to talk to the people who are donating to support our effort.
That's really cool. That's really cool. And
would
like, what level of donors get to go to that event, or is it just anyone?
We just did a query. If anyone made a donation to Street Epistemology International over since we formed the organization in 2019, we sent them an invite.
Oh, that's cool.
So you could have given $1. You could have given tens of thousands of dollars, and we would have sent you the same invite.
That's really cool. Well, Anthony, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate your opinions and your work and I'm trying to think of like the word that because I feel like work doesn't quite cover what it is you're doing. I feel like you're making a genuine change, and I see it in the videos. I see it in the comments. I see it in the way that people who claim to be a fan of yours treat me on the internet, which is like a big thing. especially as a woman on the internet, when somebody's fan base treats me with kindness and respect and nice comments in my stuff, that's always, I think, a sign of the person that they claim to be a fan of. So I really appreciate that. And I wish you all the best in the future of your street epistemology and all of your other ventures, because I have a feeling they're going to be very successful, especially that book.
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate it. And thanks for your channel and interviewing the people that you're doing. I think it's great that you're giving atheists a voice
Thank you.
and
Thank you.
normalizing non-belief. It's really important.
Right. Right. I think I'm totally biased, but I think that is important as well. So, but all right. Well, thank you so much. I'll give you your evening back. I really appreciate it. And I will send you direct links to your episode as soon as I got it up.
Sounds great. Thank you.
All right. I'll talk to you later.